And so our panel here today has all participated in some sort of experiential learning, Jewish experiential education that's helped us. And so today we have, I mean, is it tomorrow?
Tamara.
Yeah, see, I was going to get it wrong. Soon it's going to be tomorrow. Tamara Rayner-Cote, who is a Birthright alumnus and a Birthright Madricha, as well as the Masa Madricha. We have next to her, we have Ari Snyderman, a teacher here at the Talmud Torah School, and we have Sydney Podgerney, who's here today representing a March of the Living, as a March of the Living alumna. And so each of these people, there's been some overlap in the different types of experiences that they've had, but each of us is sort of going to be representing one of those pieces. Now I'm going to turn it over to them to give a brief introduction to themselves.
I'm Sydney. As Jared said, I participated in the 2012 March of the Living. I actually did not grow up going to Talmud Torah. I stopped going to Talmud Torah after kindergarten, but we always kept our traditions in our house. For myself, I always identified as Jewish, but going on the March of the Living was quite the different experience. It was my first time being in Israel, and it really just solidified that Jewish identity for myself.
As Jared said, I'm Ari Snyderman. I teach here at Talmud Torah. I grew up in Edmonton in this community, and I've been to Federation events since I was very little. I had formal training at formal education at Talmud Torah. I went to synagogue my whole life, and I've also done experiential learning experiences like Birthright. My grade 9 trip to Israel was part of the school. I did a lot of involvement in BBYO and Camp BB, and I've been to summer camps. So I have a lot of experiential and also a lot of formal Jewish education.
So my name's Tamara. I didn't go to Jewish school. I didn't have any formal Jewish education. My experience has been totally experiential and much later in life. So I took classes at the university in formal Jewish education from the outside perspective. And went to Israel the first time as a tourist and then continued to go back. Became involved with the Jewish Federation here, started attending synagogue, got more involved, went on a birthright trip, came back, went on a Masad trip, came back, led a birthright trip, came back, led a birthright trip, came back. So my experience has just continued to evolve, but it's been shaped a lot from an internal desire versus my family or my community telling me or encouraging me in one direction or another.
And my name is Jared Hanoch. I grew up going to Hebrew school. I went to Hebrew school like the Talmud Torah in Winnipeg, the elementary and junior high school until 9th grade. Then I went to public school. I attended Jewish summer camp most of my childhood and into my early university years. And I actually went to school. I have a degree in outdoor recreation and a degree in social work. I went to school thinking I wanted to be a camp director one day. And then while I was in university, I actually got more involved in youth at risk and adventure type programming and experiential education. And so I actually did my thesis on experiential and adventure-based therapies as an alternative to traditional based practices with youth at risk. And then I worked with young offenders in youth at risk and in school systems in a few different provinces. And I worked for years as a regional representative for Northwest Canada and the US with the Association for Experiential Education, including helping to plan a conference with almost 2,000 international delegates in Vancouver that specifically practice experiential education. And I just recently came back to the Jewish end of things in the last number of years since I became camp director at Camp BBB back in January of 2011. And so that's been a really exciting journey to see it come full circle. Back again. Now each of us is going to talk briefly about how what Jewish experiential education
Lutheran, so most of my experiences and most of my education has come from experience, whether it's, I went to camp for 10 years, I was part of BYO, and then finally the March of the Living. Without these experiences, I would not have had the opportunity to be places like this today. My involvement in the community is based solely on my experiences and the connections with people that I've been able to make through those experiences. Every part of it, it's funny how it kind of all comes together in the end, between camp and everything, the March of the Living, the people you meet, everything kind of always comes together, and you get to be here doing things like this today.
Okay. To me, when I am asked this question, what does Jewish experiential education mean to me? I've got two parts of that question. What does Jewish experiential education mean? What does that term mean? And then when do I find meaning in that term? So first we've got education, would be the transfer of knowledge and values, as Jared said before. And then we've got Jewish experiential education, transferring knowledge and values through Jewish experiences. So you got to figure out then what are Jewish experiences. So what's an experience? It's an observation or participation in an event. And so what's a Jewish experience? Is that when you go to an event and observe it or experience it as a Jew, so like a bar mitzvah? Or is it when you go to a mundane event and there are Jews there? Like when we went to, there was a J-Corps program a few months ago for people our age, and everybody there was Jewish, but the material had nothing to do with learning Judaism. So what I want to say is that the only curricular outcome that's really at the heart of Jewish experiential learning is, can we teach people to love being Jewish? That is the curricular objective when you're talking about Jewish experiential learning. So I find meaning in Jewish experiential learning when people are connecting with their Jewish identity and loving being Jewish.
I could go on. If you got more on the topic you'd like to say, please go.
Can we jump in over each other? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
You can interrupt me too. Think of something or
Yeah, sort of the format that we were thinking originally was sort of like each person answers the questions and then do some jump around. But feel free to jump around whatever you're comfortable with. And we were originally going to wait for questions to the end, but if it's a pretty small and informal group, so if people want to jump around, that's totally okay.
Okay, so I'll jump in for a minute and you can cut me off. I think, so Q, the question was, what does Jewish experiential education mean to me?
Yes.
That's the question. So I've had experience teaching experientially before in regular curriculum subjects like science and social studies. And the value in it is that you really do learn through doing. So if you have a foreign concept or just something that you're not comfortable with, by doing it, like you said, you become more comfortable. If you practice it, it's no longer weird and you feel like you belong in it or you relate to it or you like it. So for me, not having grown up in a formal Jewish setting of any kind, Judaism on its own was very scary, very uncomfortable, very weird, very unpleasant in a lot of ways. So to have experienced it through doing as an adult later on made it a lot more comfortable, made me able to choose what I liked and what I wanted. And then having those positive experiences for myself have now made it so that I can pass those on to other people through the programs that I lead and work with. So like Birthright or like Masa. Having done something Jewish and found the value in it, I can now honestly say to someone, you know what's really cool? Havdalah. Let me tell you why. Let's do it. Let me make a candle with you. That's awesome. Let's go do that. Because now I know how to do it, as opposed to having it just kind of read to me or seeing it in a classroom or something. I've been able to experience it. So that's really, I think the value is encouraging people to take a hands-on approach to their Judaism, and whatever aspect of it they like or they relate to really embrace those, like full on with their hands and feel it, then they'll grow from it. But if we're not encouraging that, then it's kind of like, you can go to the library and you can read about being a Jew, and that's great. But it's not necessarily going to stay with you as long. Anyone else?
I think as a camp director, and wearing a couple different hats in the presentation, well, in my personal experience, I guess my Jewish experiences at summer camp were some of the most powerful and pivotal experiences that I had. I had a really, no offense, sorry, but I had a really negative experience in Jewish day school. Mainly, I'm not the most focused and attentive student around. And at the time, which makes me a really good camp director, or not good at a bunch of other stuff. But and I really struggled in school. My marks would be, I would get a 3 or 5% in one subject and like a 95% in another subject, just depending on how the teacher was able to engage me. And so that struggle, as a young person, as a child, I wasn't necessarily able to separate the negative experiences that I was having in Jewish school with the negative experiences of being Jewish. And so some of that sort of interplayed with each other to make me really question that. And as a third generation Holocaust survivor, the Holocaust played a huge part in my life growing up. And again, it affects a lot of people differently in the way that it affected my grandparents, and a lot of the way that influenced our upbringing was very difficult. And so I struggled with my Judaism for a long time. And camp was the place that I always felt the most comfortably Jewish, and it was a type of Judaism that I loved, and that's where I found God in the wilderness. And that was always where I turned to. When I was in synagogue, I didn't feel close to God necessarily, but when I was at camp, I did. And so that was a really meaningful experience for me. I went on March Living. I was on the first one in '88, and they do a lot of things differently now, and they prepare you for it a lot. Like, we just went. There was no meetings really beforehand. I think we met once or twice so that everybody could meet. And luckily, my father was the Madrid, and so it wasn't a negative experience, but it was a Jewish experience, but not necessarily experiential education the way things are now. We've come a long way. I lived in Israel for a year on the overseas student program, and again, that was a really positive experience. And so, which brought me back to being Jewish and it being so important and part of our lives now in my family. And some of you know I'm in an interfaith marriage, but we have a Jewish home. And my kid, there's a lot of people that would say that my children aren't Jewish, but we do Shabbat almost every single Friday. They know the prayers, they love Havdalah, and so it's a part of our lives. And again, because of camp. And so that's, back to the camp director part, that camp is a living, breathing Jewish organism, and it's got the elements that Ari said about all of us. We're all Jews and we're there together, like that Jay Porter that he talked about. And we're doing Jewish stuff, like talking about Havdalah and the symbolism of how all the wicks on the candle are all interwoven together, like all of us as we're sitting and singing the Havdalah songs that we sing with our wrapped arm in arm. And so the candle becomes a metaphor for that, and the separation between camp. And like Sydney mentioned how pivotal that was in her upbringing. I've seen as an outsider coming in, I didn't grow up at this camp, but Sydney and her peer group, seeing how they interact and connect through camp and because of camp, and the connections that there's to each other and Judaism, is huge. And it really means a lot. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add on what personally Jewish experiential education means to them? I see I sort of jumped into my next question already, and I apologize. But before we move on.
Well, you mentioned that Jewish day school wasn't a positive experience for you, and you said no offense to Ari. Well, I'm not here to compare formal Jewish education to experiential learning. I believe that Talmud Torah and formal education in institutions incorporate experiential learning into their curriculum, and also simply attending a Jewish day school is a Jewish experiential learning opportunity. Just like a J-Corps event or playing in the Jewish Hockey League or going to lunch and learn are Jewish experiences which you can learn to love Judaism at. So can you love to learn Judaism at the school. If you don't leave learning Adon Olam off by heart, maybe you learn to love Judaism. And not every experience will make everyone love Judaism. If you don't love academics in school and you don't love the teachers and students that you're with, you're not going to love your experience at Talmud Torah. And if you teach here and don't understand that, then you might have a problem. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. That formal education can definitely be part of experiential education, and every experiential, a Jewish experience might draw people in and it might push them away. So choosing which ones you want to be part of your life is what I believe. It doesn't have to be every part.
I think that's huge. That's really important. Like I have friends that have been my friends since grade 1 at Jewish day school that are still some of my best friends that loved their school experience and hated camp.
Right.
Right? Yeah, you know, I think you really hit something really important there, is that there's not a magic pill, that it's not the same Jewish experiences can have a positive effect for different people. There isn't one way that works, and that's why, you know, hearing such a broad array of examples is really important. Because yeah, like I have friends that hated camp, and that their camp experiences were part of why they disassociated from the Jewish community, and the school experience is what brought them back, or in university or in Hillel or different things. And I think that's one of the things that's really important, and like how Sydney and Tamara both talked about their individual experiences sort of without the formal elements of either just one-time events, how impactful those can be. And they have to be the right events for the right people. Even when you're talking about there's like a number of different birthright options. There's a number of different like overseas study programs. There's a number of different ways to see, to participate in March and Living and things like that, and different marches that are being taken place.
What's more important than being involved in each of the experiences is knowing that they're there and finding value in them. I, for instance, do not play in the Jewish Hockey League, but I would hate to see it fold because it's many people's only attachment to the Jewish community. And a lot of people don't attend Talmud Torah, but they see value in it because it is one of the only ways for many people to grow up involved in the Jewish community.
That's so, as the events and somebody's still growing up in the Jewish community. Can you, Sydney, can you start us off in talking about how the Jewish experiential education has really impacted your life and involvement in our community?
Well, just having no formal involvement, it was my link into the Jewish community. It really brought me, I guess, back to the Jewish community. From the moment that I decided to go on the march up until now, it has been a complete process. Everyone knows Joey Appleton. I met him when I was 7. He was my camp counselor. We reconnected in BYO, and then he led my March for Living group. He's been amazing. It's just the people that I've met through the March for Living brings me to so many events. Last year I got to speak at a Holocaust Education Symposium. When I go into events, it's nice to see friendly faces like Jared, people I've met through different experiences. I am still quite young, I'm only 19. So just continuing these experiences, even just once in a while, means a lot to me. It means a lot that I get to be here today speaking on behalf of the March. It's done a lot for me. Even in my personal life, with Jewish and non-Jewish people, getting to do presentations at my high school from the March of the Living. It's really interesting to see who actually is interested to hear me speak about it. It's really great to be able to give back in that sense, especially to people who aren't Jewish, who might not have that education on it. It's really interesting.
So when you're speaking like about the march and things like that, what are some of the important lessons that you're trying to share with others? And am I jumping to the next part for you?
No.
Like when you got the symposium, that's a big event, right?
The main on the symposium was high school students who weren't Jewish, and they had a Holocaust speaking, and then I spoke. And the main, what I got out of the March of the Living, my main experience was just patience with anyone in your life. That's something I really got out of the march, and just trying to share that with other young kids to teach them like non-ignorance and patience and cultural diversity. It's really interesting to see. A lot of them actually appeared to be quite moved by the Holocaust survivors presentation. It was really interesting to see. It's not usually about my experience in general, so it's very easy to say we visited Auschwitz, we visited Birkenau, but to say what we got out of it is completely different.
Great. So before we move on, does anybody want to talk more about how it's impacted their lives?
Yeah.
Substantially.
Right, a lot. Yes, and I went on birthright. Israel's 66, turning 67. So I went on birthright the year Israel turned 61, I guess, something like that. Not that long ago, and completely changed everything for me. I was working for the Jewish Federation, like in Camp Shalom, decided to go on birthright, and met not only like some of my best friends still to this day. I did the most cliche thing, and I dated one of the soldiers for 2 years. So it totally impacted my life. No longer together, it's okay. But it really changed my life. And I went to Israel, and I had that 10-day snap of, this is Israel, and the beaches, and the bars, and you could go to the Holocaust Museum, and you could do this, and you get to camp, and you could hike, and then it's done. And I'd already been to Israel once, so I knew that there was more. And I stayed after that. And upon returning to Canada, applied immediately for a long-term program. So I went from the back of Birthright right into Masa. And I did a 10-month volunteer program and lived as a local and had a full-time job and lived in a communal setting with 6 other people and tried to learn Hebrew and took the bus and bought groceries and did everything that you would do if you were living in Israel, except that I was still a Canadian and still kind of outside, but inside. So my experience from Birthright was very positive, and it led me towards wanting more of Israel. And then my experience as a Masa participant was very positive, and upon returning from that, I applied to be a madrika. I also worked with a different organization, and I took kids to Auschwitz. So I've done it now the past 2 summers where I lead groups there. So it's interesting to hear you talk about it. I'm like, yeah, like when I ask my kids, like, what do you learn being in Poland? Usually it's like, there's no vegetables. I'm tired of eating bread. Polish people are not nice to me. And the Holocaust is bad. But now, having some time after having gone, I'm sure that their response would probably be deeper. Because the initial response is really hard. And it's really basic and really shallow. They don't know what to say. So now hearing your response, I'm like, wow. I'm going to reconnect with some of those kids and find out what they thought. But yeah, without my experiential education through Birthright and through Masa, I wouldn't have applied to lead a group. I would not have gone back to be a madrika now 4 times over. I would not be teaching Sunday school at Shalom. I would not have done any of those things if I had not had something click in that 10-day experience where I wasn't just interested in walking down Vancouver Street and buying the best falafel. I really wanted to know why this land was so disputed and why I wanted to be there so much. And it's changed the entire course of that, unfortunately. But, yeah.
point to a string of events that led to me becoming. It's interesting that you point to birthright as the impetus.
Yeah.
And there's, well, I grew up from birth to have all of the Jewish experiences you can have in this community. But there were several that were impetus, that did springboard my life to lead in the direction of Jewish formal education. And I've experienced also an Israel trip with my grade 9 class. It was very similar to the itinerary of Birthright, not in 10 days and with way less alcohol.
Less alcohol, nice. Okay.
But something that happened there when we were in the north and we had to flee because of rockets made me wonder, why did I just have to do that? I was just staying with a lovely Israeli family and have to leave my Israeli family. Someone's shooting rockets at them. And I started to learn a lot about Israel's struggles with its neighbors. And that became a very important part of my life in high school. I also just learned to play guitar because I wanted to have song sessions from camp when I come home. And we can't do that without guitar. So those two things are just some small examples of how Jewish experiential learning changed my life and led me on a path to being a full-time Jew.
Professionally.
That's right.
Yeah, I want to say something about those song sessions. There's songs that get stuck in your head and you're like, I don't know why I'm singing Modani right now, but I am. And it's interesting because it is stuff like you'll find that I get really excited when I walk past an Israeli in the mall. Not because I want to buy Dead Sea products, but because I know what they're saying and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And then I walk by and I don't make eye contact, but it's those moments where you're like, I really do feel connected, or I really do click with that person, or yeah, we know the same tune to that song, or like we don't know the same tune, but we know that we both know that song, or I can be like, what do you think about Auschwitz? Like we can have those discussions because we've had similar experiences, and I think that's awesome.
And I think that a lot of those experiences connect us.
Yeah.
Right? Like Sydney and I have never talked about martial living, but the fact that we both there and did it, it's like something that it's like you share it on. It's like being Jewish, right? And then many of us, when you bump into another Jewish person, might be a completely different way of living, but we're all Jews, right? And it's my kids tell me they're Jewish and Portuguese, but they're missing a little bit because they're still so young. But there's a piece of being Jewish that's all about the connection to those experiences that bind us.
Just one more thing. I think it's just a little something, whether it is Havdalah at camp or that connection that even we've talked about it, we've both been on the march of living, we've seen the same things. It's just that little connection that you can make with someone else that could change your whole life. Like the connection of camp changed my life forever. I went to camp with the same girls and people that I went to kindergarten with. And then we kind of disconnected, and we found each other at camp, and then we went on the march living together. And it's just those little things, that little bit of connection, that can really change someone's whole Judaic experience.
I think that, building on your metaphor, the connections, if you think of it as like a dot-to-dot puzzle, right? To have a whole and fulfilling Jewish life. And there's a lot of different dots and a lot of different ways to draw that picture, but a similar, and different pictures come out, but but there's some beautiful pictures. All those little dots are connected over time. What recommendations do you have to make to the community for families, individuals, for our guests looking to engage in these kinds of opportunities? Who wants to tackle that one first?
I got one. I would say that I know, so this past summer I was in Israel for my second war, and I heard a lot of people when I came back say, why would you go? Yeah, I'm a veteran. Why would you go? And why would your parents let you go? And why? And I think and it's very individual and it's very personal, but something about that kind of made me feel disheartened is this idea that you don't want to go to Israel. And for me, a lot of, like, maybe it's not a good idea to go to Israel anymore. Maybe we should stay here. Maybe we shouldn't send our kids. Maybe. And because the majority of my experiential education has been there, like, I know the story of Masada because I've climbed Masada 8 times. I know the old city of Jerusalem because I've been there and I can take you there, right? So if we lose those experiences, if we stop telling people to go, or if we stop kind of being open to the idea that we can go, then a lot of that experiential learning won't happen. And that would be my recommendation, that, like, yeah, it's scary, and yeah, it's not always a great place, and it's not safe, and maybe you don't agree politically, or maybe you don't agree religiously, or what have you, but closing off that option entirely is not the best option. Maybe finding a way to approach Israel in a way that's more comfortable for you is good. You should do that, but you shouldn't tell your friends and family and your kids not to go, because that distances people, whereas really what we need right now is maybe to be a little bit more running back to that. That would be my recommendation.
Recommendations?
So I would say that the three of us have very different stories, and me and Tamara's are very specific. Tamara's story and my story are very specific. There are not a lot of Jews who grow up in Edmonton and make Aliyah, and there are not a lot of Jews that grow up in Edmonton and become Talmud Torah day school teachers. And I'm not and I hope that you don't get the impression that I'm trying to stand up here and say, I'm an excellent example, and Tamara's saying, I'm an excellent example.
Not saying that.
I just think that everyone, and Sydney is like a lot of people. She's had Jewish experiences and she wants to participate in the community, and she proved it with her feet today, and her mouth. And there's so many people who just can't. They won't come because it's scary, or they don't feel comfortable. And there are so many experiences that can make you part of the community. It's not just going to Israel, it's not just going to day school. Every experience has a role to play in this community. So the advice I have for anyone in the community is to seek out what they like, and they can do it Jewishly. I already mentioned a few. But I have a whole list. There are literally hundreds of experiences every year that a Jew can have in this city. Also, that this city takes them to other places. If you're like a baby, then just hear some Jewish lullabies. But if your mom doesn't know Jewish lullabies, then she should go to the Rimonim Club, where everyone has a baby. And then I mentioned Talmud Torah. If there are teenagers, you have youth groups for every single denomination, USY, NIFTY, and NCSY, as well as non-denominational BBYO. No matter what type of Jew you are, there's an organization that wants you if you're age 14 to 18. Send them to Bar Mitzvah classes, drag them out to Simchat Torah, just see what it's about. College kids go to Hillel, go on Birthright, join the Jewish sports leagues and work at camp, do any and or all, and you may find some fulfillment somewhere in the community. Young professionals go to JCOR, and everybody should donate to UJA so we can continue to have all these things. And there are many, many ways to be involved in the community, but you have to start using your feet and doing the things. And I can see from the empty chairs that people are not getting that message. But maybe they just don't know that there are so many ways to have Jewish experiences in this city.
Thank you. Good point.
I think you should write an article about that.
Huh?
Write an article about it.
For my call.
That's a good bit already.
Right, all the articles.
It's already written?
Just speaking a little more specifically on the March of the Living and events such as I'm just not shying away from them is something, the March of Living can be quite scary to think about. I know for a parent, it can be quite scary to think of sending your kid that far away. What is my kid going to see? Are they going to come back different? How is it going to affect them? It can be a lot, but not shying away from it is huge. A lot of kids have different experiences of the March, but I know on my trip, I didn't talk to a single person who had a negative experience. Jerry said it's changed so much. The preparation is huge. We do numerous meetings before, weekly numerous meetings. The people they hire to be trip leaders are amazing. Everything is a process, and there are many different ways to go on the March of Living or see concentration camps. There are adult marches, there are marches for non-Jewish people, and it's just really important, like Ari said, for people to seek out if you're interested, if you've ever been interested, maybe if you aren't educated on it and you'd like to see it, there's many ways to do it. Everyone watches the news, I'm sure, and sees and hears what's happening in the world right now in Europe, anti-Semitism. It's always something that will be a part of the world, and for people to shy away from events such as the March. And especially in Edmonton, there aren't a lot of people who go. Who like have grandkids or anything, I really highly recommend. Just even looking into it. Camp as well. Everything is amazing.
I really want to reiterate that to check out the opportunities, like each of these panelists have said today, is there is something for everybody out there. And if we don't have it in this community, there may be a way to connect with it online or correspondence or to go away to a different program. When families ask me about summer camp and whether their kids should go to Camp Rebak or not, always for me the first question really is, should your child go to camp? Right? I believe that all children should go to summer camp. We have to find the right camp for that child. Secondly, so hopefully all kids go to camp, hopefully all kids go to Jewish camp, and then finally, hopefully they go to the one that I'm currently operating. Right, but that's the order of importance. It's not, I'm not trying to sell Camp Rebak as the only and the most important option out there, because it's not. There are, like I grew up at a different, there are camps out there that are as varied as the children and the members and the people in our communities. And same with the adults. We're also diverse, and it's important for people to find, and you can hear it in the passion of these three people up here, that they found something that was meaningful for them, and it's helped them, and now they are leaders within our community. And so that's really what I think, as far as recommendations, is find the right thing for the right person. And if you don't know what that answer is, seek out the resources. Talk to the Federation, talk to people like these, like us, and we'll do our best to help. And if the Federation doesn't know the answer, I'm sure that they'll help find it. Is that there are things out there that are going to create and sustain our communities, and we need to be willing to look at options and find those things that are going to be meaningful. What's next?
Okay. Obviously, there are the large things. I'd like to look into birthright. My brother went this previous summer and he absolutely loved it. So looking into birthright, I'd like to go back even to see more of Poland, maybe even Germany. It was such an interesting trip that it still continues to intrigue me. But it is just the little things, coming to community events. Like I already said, there are so many ways to get involved. So just trying to be involved in the community as much as possible. Between all the large things that you can do, there's always those little things.
Tell your friend, right?
I can go.
You can say yours for less.
No, I don't want to be done. So in January, I'm making Aliyah, so obviously my connection is there. But that's not where it's going to end for me. Like, that's not my be all and end all. This was a long time coming and a big decision for me, but what's really driving me is I want to be a tour guide. I really, really want to be a tour guide, and I already have an education degree, and I've worked as a teacher in Israel, and I've worked as a madrika, and I've worked as a educational guide with summer camp in Israel, and I can't get enough. And I don't want to be in a classroom where I have to slam on desks to get kids' attention. I want them to be as engaged as I am, and the best way for me to do that is to be there in Israel and to be able to like wake up at 5 a.m. and do a hike and be like, okay, now you're going to learn about Abraham because it's all connected, right? So that for me, that's my full circle educational dream, goal, inspiration. That to maybe own a goat one day. It's really up there.
A Jewish goat.
Well, yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
You can let him decide for himself.
Exactly. And that's a good point, though. Sorry, yeah. Deciding for yourself and like really, truly 100% my desire to learn came from like really good hummus one time. Or, you know, a CD that I heard and was like, I like that beat, I want to know what they're saying. Like it came from experiencing Judaism and experiencing Israel and Israeli culture, and then going out and what does it mean to be a Persian Jew, and finding it that way. So I found something that hooked me and I just went for it. So it is choosing. A lot of it is about choosing. Your turn.
Well, I have Jewish experiences every day, and it's super awesome. I love my work as formal Jewish educator. I think the material is fascinating, and I'm so lucky to be able to talk about it all day, every day between somersaults. So I also teach gym, and I want to see what my students are about to do, what kind of experiences they're going to go to. I love to see them at community events, and I want to see them, you know, going on March of the Living and Birthright. And now some of my students are even older than Sydney that I first took to Israel, and I want to. And it's incredible. It's so exciting to me that all of these opportunities lay in front of them, and I want to know who's working at camp this summer, and who's going to Israel, and who's doing what. And I want to see the impact that I made, and what's next for this community, because they are going to be us soon. And I'm also going to have my own kids, you know, eventually, hopefully, God willing, and then we'll see what they do too.
So that's really where I'm at. Is pretty much where Ari, you know, is helping to facilitate the journey for the young people that attend camp and the families, and trying to engage more people in that process. Is trying to help people that aren't really connected to the community find that, and maybe through camp or another means, and to help that, and then doing the journey with my own children who are. My daughter just turned 6 on Thursday, and my son turns 8 in December, and so you know, repeating the whole journey with them and trying to do it all right. And it's way easier taking care of other people's kids than your own.
That's all right. One L.
Yeah. It's you know, and walking the journey again through their eyes and through the eyes of the people that I work with. Is there anything that you folks would like to ask any of us about our experiences, about Jewish education?
So it's going to be one of these expert speeches in the form of questions. As someone that had basically a mirror image of Amar's experiences, I mean, I had to go to America to find my Judaism. Growing up in a secular Israeli family, secular anti-religious family. For me, although I at camp told me that there was something really missing in the way that I grew up. And I find it very fitting that all of you mentioned camp, though. Because this is probably one of the biggest successes that American Judaism has is camp. Everybody talks about it, everybody wants to do it. I don't get past that. How do we bring it closer? Part of my rabbinic training is bringing this experiential aspect of Judaism into synagogue life. And I think this is where North American Judaism fails to this way. Because people can go to camp back, loving being Jewish, There were shul Shabbat mornings, 3 hours a month. And sorry. And if we could bring the camp experience of Judaism into everyday Judaism, not only every Shabbat Judaism, but everyday Judaism, then we'll be
And I think, yeah, like I'm encouraged when I hear people like Arya, I know his teaching style and things like that. Like I think from what I understand, he's a great example of bringing that into the classroom and into the school. And the PJ library happening next door.
That was on my list when I was going through all this.
You know, is another example of how do we capture these types of experiences and bring them in. The Gold Sand Bar Mitzvah last month or a couple months ago. Did you guys do a camp on that? And Rabbi Cleel has gotten me to shul more than I've been in the last 10 years, I think.
I think part of it too is like, I think people, at least my age, my friends and I know, we're scared. We don't know how to do stuff. I can't lead a Seder. I don't know how to lead a Seder. I don't know how to do a Seder. So I just won't have one, right? I think at camp, you're like, well, I don't know how to do it, but somebody here is going to kind of help me figure it out. And that's maybe an approach we need to take, that like this year for Rosh Hashanah, I hosted a group of friends because I wanted to have Rosh Hashanah and I wanted to do it my way, and I didn't want to feel like I needed somebody to tell me the right way to do it. So I did it kind of camp style. I'm like, okay, you're all going to say something you're thankful for, and we're going to go around, and it was wonderful.
For you, it is the right way for you.
Exactly. And that's something that comes with camp mentality sometimes. It's like, you tell kids, it's okay if you don't know the prayer, come up and hum then. Right? And then at synagogue, you're told, well, if you don't know the prayer, like, why are you here?
Well,
it's a little, sometimes so we.
You know, we use the word camp a lot, and because camp's a good example of where it happens, but it happens outside of camp too. And that was a big part of, I had a business for a while because I used to work in the bush, like deep in the bush and on ropes courses and on the sides of mountains with young offenders and youth at risk and using experience to rehabilitate them. And then I started doing that, trying to bring it into treatment centers and into the classroom. And there's a whole movement of that. And then even in corporate stuff. And so we've learned even the most recent Outward Bound schools, Outward Bound sold their 4 Canadian properties. And when you think about like camp and outdoor adventure, Outward Bound have been doing it since 1920 something. And they just sold their 4 Canadian properties and moved them all into urban environments. And they're delivering, and they still go out in the wilderness sometimes, but they're bringing their programs to the people. And it's like that sort of idea. How do we bring Havdalah to our homes and to our cities? And I think that's that's a piece of it. Like going to Poland is important, but how do we bring it home? How do we bring that into the classroom? How do we keep sharing those experiences with people? And I'm just being willing to continue to explore those things and make it part of day-to-day life.
I think the Shabbos initiative, which is partnered with the Shabbos project, which I'll just give that a bit of background information, which is basically partnering Shabbat hosts and Shabbat guests together in participatory homes and ensuring they have the amenities to hold a Shabbat in whatever way they so choose. So that's candles, chalot, a cutting board, a bottle of kosher wine, things like that, and then a set of liturgy of your choice, whether that's Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox, so that you can craft a Jewish experience such that it meets the needs and the wants of people in attendance. I think that kind of participatory, inclusive Jewish opportunity really brings, like what you're saying, brings people. You're bringing it home, physically home. You're bringing it to people's houses, but you're also giving them a sense of ownership too. So this is crafting Jewish experiences and crafting Jewish learning in a group environment in a way that people feel comfortable with, in a way in which people, can do Jewish in the way that they so see fit.
Yeah, that's personally these views in no way would reflect the view of the Federation or County of Rebecca, but is creating accessible Judaism, right? Is the reality is I think I'm a little bit older than the rest of the panel. I turned 43 this summer, but is our Bobby and Zadie's Judaism is not really what most people are looking for anymore in our age groups, or some people are, but there needs to be alternatives. There need to be ways to express your Judaism in a way that's meaningful for you. The fact, so like I'm in an interfaith marriage, and a lot of people have a problem with that, and they hope, and believe me, my advice to anybody is it's hard enough to be married, never mind an interfaith marriage. And we got married fairly, I've only been married for 10 years, 9 years, so it was a second relationship, it was late in my life, and but it's not easy. And if we weren't both sort of professional social workers, I don't know if we could pull it off. But there's a lot of people that don't think what I'm doing is right, and something even. But it's funny because my mom talks to her friends and question, what's it? Must be really hard. And she's like, my daughter does more. Like they start comparing notes, and the reality is, my Catholic wife, it runs a very Jewish home, and she baked round sweet challah from scratch, and she does everything. If it wasn't for her, we probably wouldn't celebrate half the holidays as much as we do, because it's important to her to run a Jewish home, and that we're going to do it the way that the grandparents did it. We're going to use their recipes, and we're going to keep the connection to the past alive. And so I think that for me personally, it's just being willing to find something that works and do it. Last words from anybody?
Sure. As long as it's written. Just a paragraph. Just think it's really important for everyone in the community to find their experience and do it, and love being Jewish. As I said, I love teaching at Talmud Torah. I love the material, but it wouldn't mean anything to any of these students if they didn't have experiences that made them love being Jewish. So I hope that people in the community will take their opportunities. I always do. Hope that is. I always hope
Can
that.
I say something?
Mm.
I want to say that I think that you guys being on this panel and showing that you've turned your experiences into sharing those experiences with others, I think is such an important part. You mentioned your trip leaders, and you're sort of indirectly saying it, but I think it's just so important that your experiences have become to make sure that other people have experiences. And I think that's really awesome.
Any other questions? So I guess before I facilitate the closure of this session, I guess I want to say that I think, echoing on Farron's comments, is that by having you guys here present and speaking about your experiences, I think you've really shown and communicated very clearly that there's a lot of merit and worth to the investment that we as a community, put into our young people and into these kind of experiences. I think that often it's very easy to kind of fall into the concern of, what's the state of Judaism today? Where will we be in 15 years? And I think that's something that many people think about. That's a completely valid concern. And I think just not only the fact that you guys have been experiencing these experiential opportunities, but also have been involved in kind of passing on that knowledge, kind of spreading, the desire to invest in our community. I think that's critical. And I think that folks like you guys and the many others who are involved in these kinds of opportunities are really carrying on the vanguard of keeping Judaism relevant. And so I think you owe yourselves all a pat on the back. And I want to thank you guys as community members for not only being here and listening, but also investing your time, your dollars, what have you, your emotions in really ensuring that we as a community can continue the good work that we do. So thank you to our panelists. I want to thank all of you. And I want to thank all of you guys as well for coming. This was a really personal thing. I thought this was a really nice opportunity. I learned as well, which was great. So I hope you guys all did too. So thanks very much.